on my phone, I mean I talk to the money.
What is an exploit? Usually the definition used is an unintended game feature, which on the surface looks like a useful definition, but the issue is in many cases there's a lot of features and mechanics that get used frequently, and many people would not consider those things an exploit. And naturally, there are other more game impactful things that other people will consider an exploit. So today I'm going to be presenting 5 exploits or unintended game features for EU4 that could potentially be defined as an exploit going by the strictest definition. These exploits are going to be ranked from level 1, which I would say is the least exploit, all the way to level 5, and I'll let you decide personally where you draw the line. Sounds good? Perfect. So feel free to go ahead and head on down below. Exploit the like button counter as well as a sub button counter if you haven't already. But with that self-shilling out of the way, let's begin with level 1. So for level 1, here we have a normal game. I'm going to load into England. I'm not going to go in Iron Man mode because it doesn't matter for now. We can do this in both Iron Man and non-Iron Man saves. And the exploit we're going to be doing today is the boat locked in trick, which we can basically bypass the requirements of being locked into movement on a province when they are attempting to land. So for example, if we have these boats here, we sail them out. Let's wait for them to sail out. Perfect, they've sailed out. And we were to start marching. We could cancel this because they're not locked in. We can go ahead anywhere else. But they are going to eventually, after enough movement, lock in. So if we wait, there we go. See, they've locked in. We are now unable to cancel this movement. So for example, if we wanted to make them go here, that's not possible because land movement is, we're already locked in. Of course, you can chain an order for them after they've locked in to go somewhere else. But we can't make them go straight to Essex now. But what we can do is take these boats and move them to a different tile. In fact, we don't even need to move, we just need to give the order. This cancels the locked in mechanic and lets us move it in again. Technically, this is an exploit. You're not meant to be able to do that. Once your troops are locked in, you should not be able to just reset it by on the same day, issuing an order to your boats and then resetting your locked in movement. The AI also does not know this. If, for example, you had a defending army somewhere around in London and you saw the AI were moving to Norfolk, you could move your army over to Norfolk and defend it against this landing army, force them to take a -2 landing penalty against you. The AI will not be keen to go into that battle because they know of the -2 and will evaluate their chance of success, but because they don't know you can use this exploit, they won't do it. And that's my argument of why it's a level 1 exploit. The AI won't do it. My issue is that it's a very simple thing to intuitively think about, that if you remove the boats from a landing, you're not doing a landing. This is why it's a level 1 exploit. And in fact, the AI does sometimes do it by accident. If you also happen to have another fleet, say in Cornwall, which was just sitting in Cornwall, and the French were trying to land in Norfolk, you could move that fleet up and scare the French away, and they would move away, in essence performing this exploit. However, the AI won't consciously, when they evaluate should I land in Norfolk, take into account that they can cancel that locked-in movement at any point by moving away their ships. As such, by the strictest definition possible, and that is of our level 1, this is an exploit, the boat locked-in trick to unlock your troops trying to land. Now let's get to level 2. This is still going to be done within the same save. It has the same parameters of your setup, but this one is a bit more conscious and a bit more exploity with how it's set up. What you're going to need for this is at least one fleet which has automatic transportation enabled. Then you're going to need to select an army, or any army that you're using, any army you're fighting with, and let's say you're fighting around and you are going to Hampshire. However, as you're doing so, you lock in. In fact, we've almost arrived. We arrive next day. There should be no way of us preventing us arriving in Hampshire. But if we have a fleet that has enabled automatic transportation, what we can do is select this army and tell it to go somewhere that isn't adjacent to Hampshire, like say Pale. It will ask us if we would like to use automatic transportation. We'll go with yes. Yes, we will. Then we don't actually have to use it. And what we've just done now is not arrived in Hampshire despite locking into the province. This is level 2 exploit because it's much harder to do accidentally, but it can still be abused to a very nice category. The AI, let's say there was an army here, can sometimes see that you are marching into them, and when you're locked in and they know you are going to arrive before them, start moving towards you. I'm not sure why the AI does that, but from a headcanon point of view, it looks quite cool. Their army is preparing for battle, marching out to meet yours. This can be abused, because if you wait until you're locked in and then they lock in, then use this trick to reset your movement lock, you can force the AI to take a lot of attacking battles that they don't want to take. The same can be also done with rebels to conserve manpower. This is a level 2 exploit because compared to the first one, the level 1, this is a lot more conscious. You have to be really conscious that you are doing this. It's very hard to perform this accidentally. Still possible, and the AI pretty much would never do this. The AI has no idea that it can technically reset its locked-in mechanics by attempting to use automatic transportation. With that said though, and this is where we move on to level 3, and this is where it gets interesting because there's a lot to talk about within this one example. I'm of course referring to, in Iron Man saves, birding or safe scumming, or however you want to call it, auto F4ing. In essence, this is a way to mitigate RNG and bad luck at its purest form. You had a 666 ruler that died, just auto F4, and you go back to a previous save 6 months ago. Something awkward happened, a bad event that you didn't want to occur happened, just auto F4 and go back 6 months. Now, this can be used as a way of mitigating bad RNG by some players. If if you had a 666 air you're really looking forward to, and then they happen to die of a hunting accident, well, a bird can be used to avoid that. And you might be thinking, that's not that big of a deal, why is it in level 3? The issue is just how potentially powerful birding becomes if you're willing to abuse it. For example, if you really want, say, an AE reduction, you can pick up an idea group such as Influence and then wait for a pulse event. Those pulse events are quite rare and very hard to time, but if you're birding, a 0.5% chance becomes a 100% chance. This can mean that you are pretty much guaranteeing any specific pulse events you want for good luck. You'd wanted to save your 10% discipline event for later, just bird, that's fine. And it gets even more ridiculous if you're really willing to push it to its limit. Let's say you are potentially doing a world conquest run in 1472 as a horde, and you're trying to really push it, to really try and get the best day possible. You can just bird every time you don't roll the maximum siege on a siege. This gives you ungodly siege speeds, as you are basically guaranteed to roll a 14 on every siege, putting all cannons to shame, and when you have cannons, make it even more insane. So in essence, you get a massive boost to siege races, but you also get a massive boost to just fighting, because what's stopping you when you enter a battle? You get a bad roll, yeah, gets a good roll, just bird. Keep birding until you're all a 9 and they roll a 0 in every single battle. In fact, if you're willing to go far enough with birding and safe setting any kind of bad luck in this game, you can guarantee yourself +9 dice rolls. You can guarantee yourself much better sieging. You're guaranteeing like +14 siege from every single dice roll in question, and winning every single 7% when the AI just takes a disease outbreak every time they step on your forts. And in fact, if you're willing to abuse safe scumming to its fullest potential, in essence, you are immune to any bad event, and you have the pick of the pack of any good event you want in your game. This is why it's in level 3, because safe scumming, if abused fully, or birding, or however you want to call it, is incredibly powerful. You basically get your pick of whatever you want to be doing, and this is why it's level 3 for me. I know most people that are doing the odd bird in there aren't abusing it to that full extent, but if you are a person who frequently safe scums and birds in this way in Iron Man, I would suggest, just as a personal challenge, try and do a game, an honest Iron Man game, as any country you wish, but have it as a personal challenge for yourself. You won't bird. Your 666 ruler dies, bad RNG, you keep going. You get a bad event, you're inside of a disaster, and you're 1 stability away from exiting, and it's just 10 admin away from getting that extra stability point because it costs you 200 and you're making 10 a month and you're on 190. You're almost out of the disaster, and then you get a comet sighted. Well, sometimes life do just be like that. Try a campaign and see just how much of a difference it makes. Even mitigating bad RNG from rulers really buffs monarchies in comparison to republics, who don't have that much of a deviation in how good and bad their rulers. But with all that said and done, that concludes the level 3 exploit. For level 4, however, we're going to need to go back a bit in time. The concept of an exploit is what I'm going to be describing here, but now that we're getting to level 4, they're starting to get quite powerful. So I'm not comfortable demonstrating one that works on the current patch. I am, however, going to be happy to demonstrate the one that worked in an older patch. And in essence, it's not the exploit itself has been patched, but the principle of the exploit that I'm demonstrating here today anyway. So we're in quite a bit of an old patch at this point, 1.28. So this is before quite a few releases. Again, this has been patched in the current version. I just didn't want to show an actual version of this exploit that works in the current patch. But what I mean by this is when you start actually getting into the game code itself, you're not quite going into the game code as a hacker would, but more specifically starting to understand how that game code works and start manipulating from within the game. Let me demonstrate. So here we have an old version of Europe, and there we go, look at that, old green Portugal and old normal complements. And let's say you want to play Granada and you want to get yourself the achievement where you have to do the Reconquista. Great plan, right? Small issue with that, well, plan is the fact that Castile exists. But don't worry, we can fix that. So first things first, we're going to need is, in our part of our setup, is we're going to need a 1444 Iron Man save. So I've selected Navarra here, and I will go in an Iron Man mode. This is not going to be counted towards my leaderboard score because I'm not logged in, etc, etc, and I wouldn't want it to count anyway. But we're just going to have a 1444 completely still paused version of a save. So we're just going to call this our setup. Just need to create the save. The only job you need to do in the save is make sure to not unpause. Then we need to exit the menu. Okay, and now you should have an Iron Man save that you can access. Now let's do a bit of our map painting. We're going to go into a normal non-Iron Man game, like the country we want to play as, or whatever we want to start the normal save as, considering we have access to the console, and well, again, get into Granada. Now, the person that we want to be getting rid of in this case is going to be Castile, and we might as well do Aragon and Portugal for the fun of it. So we can enable debug mode so that we can see what we're doing, but we're going to annex Castile, we're going to annex Aragon, and for good measure, we're going to annex Portugal. Now, obviously, this is not an Iron Man save file, which is why achievements are very clearly disabled. Either way, we're going to now go ahead and save this. We can call this any kind of setup we want. Now, again, need to exit the menu. So here we are. Our last continue game should be whatever we just concocted over there. And it's important that when you do your concoction, you also don't unpause. You must still remain in 1444. Now, we're going to abuse a little bit of a fun paradox mechanic where it doesn't want to change the map every time when it switches between 44 saves. So we're going to go to our Granada setup here. And obviously, you know, we can't exactly start this game in Iron Man, but we're going to create a custom nation. And we're going to give this custom nation all of the provinces that we gave ourselves as Granada. Wonderful. Okay, so we have this custom nation here in Cadiz, looking great. Then we're going to press done. So in our save, we now have a custom nation. No issues there, right? We're going to then go to our setup save here that we called for the Ironman. We're going to click it. And what's going to happen is the game's going to give us a pop-up. It's going to have a question to ask. Namely that changing the starting date will delete the custom nations you decide. Are you sure you want to do this? Not really. I don't want to delete the custom nation I just spent all that time making, so I'm going to press cancel. But maybe, I mean, I would like to still maybe have a custom nation in an uncolonized province. So we're going to take our previously created custom nation. I'm going to add to it. I'm going to add an uncolonized province here. You may have already seen what's happened over there, but I actually changed my mind yet again. I don't want to modify that custom nation. I'm gonna delete it. I'm not a fan of Tura. But what I am going to be doing now is selecting Granada, and I'm going to click play, and I'm going to enable Ironman mode. And now I can start again. Totally legit Granada. Yeah, that just happened. So for the record of what's going on here as well, Paradox has some fascinating ways of updating how the game handles custom nations, as well as other things. And to be clear, if you can be bothered, you can complete an 11th of November 1444 true one-tag world conquest using this strategy. It's a lot of work. You have to make a huge amount of custom save files, setup, etc, etc, etc. But you can achieve an Ironman compatible world conquest as Granada in 1444 11th of November without unpausing. Now, we do have a couple issues. This method does not give you cores, so we are slightly overextended. Furthermore, this method can be quite a bit more useful if you're playing someone as like the Timurids that start with a lot of cores they don't own, so you can just give those cores you start with. The other thing to bear in mind is there are variations of this, so because we yeeted Castile from the map, the Castilian cores don't exist, which is also great for our separatists. But what that means is we've just deleted Castilian cores from the planet. If we say we're playing as Byzantium, we're really struggling against the Ottomans. You know what would really help you to fight the Ottomans early on? You can delete the Ottoman cores. Yes, so that means as the Ottomans will still look normal, most people that would inspect your save file will just see, yep, a normal looking Ottomans, but they're going to be absolutely crippled because they're not going to have any cores in their land, like at all. So there are variations of this that are incredibly powerful. And of course, removing cores can be very powerful for an HRE game like Austria, because if you remove the cores of Brandenburg on, say, Ortmark, you can then go ahead to Brandenburg and say, hey, you don't have a core in that province, give me back your unlawful territory. And because no one has a core in that province, you'll get the province, which is going to be great if you want to grab some provinces up north, so you have the reach to enforce the empire, you have access to fabricating claims, and B, when the Reformation pops up, you have access to a lot of the provinces to fabricate claims to crush that early. That's just how subtle you want to be. If you want to be completely unsubtle about it, you can do what I just did here and start as all of Iberia with Granada. So again, the world's your oyster in this case. Go ahead and map paint. Quite a bit of setup, but you can go ahead and do it and enjoy your achievements in the process. For the record, don't actually do this. But that will conclude the tier 4, because after tier 4 we need to move on to tier 5, and this is where we really take it a step up from here, which is impressive. One would think that playing as a large Iberia-sized Granada would be the end of a list of exploits that you can do, but you can go further. See, Paradox, when it loads EU4, does some creative, interesting things. For example, when it generates this checksum to make sure you haven't modded the game to give England 100% compatibility, one of the things it does is it generates the checksum. It generates the map files, so your visual looks and your visual things like that, after generating the checksum. This is actually quite a good idea. If you just have a visual mod on, you should not be prevented from playing Ironman EU4. After all, just changing the texture of a country should not disable Ironman. Great idea, that's all fine. The issue, of course, comes when you can start exploiting that tool and just doing some, as I would like to say, creative interpretations of how Paradox loads the game. And at tier 5, start saving files while EU4 is loading, so that it loads with the correct checksum, but you've modified things like the English starting ideas. For example, England over here may actually begin the game with -1 unrest and 10% infantry compatibility. But if you change the file at the correct time while loading into the game, you can load in with a normal checksum, but have England run around with, I don't know, 100% admin efficiency and 99999 infantry compatibility. That'll help it fight the French. Or how about making it so when the French do get the event surrender of Maine, one of the both options that they can take, give them collapse of society. A wonderful modifier, giving you negatives to discipline and negatives to morale. And instead of making that last, I don't know, something reasonable, make that last until the end of the game. Yeah, really, the world is your oyster when you start delving into this kind of domain. Again, it's a lot of work in some regards. You have to be really good on your timings, or you have to do a really good setup for it, but you can. And this isn't limited to single player as well. There are tools out there that I'm not going to recommend, I'm not going to name, because I run multiplayer lobbies and I don't want them used in mine, that can let you do things like generate mana points, or develop for free, or give you any tech you want, and other things like that. Turns out Paradox didn't really spend much time in hacking prevention in this game, or maybe they did, but unlike other competitive games where there's going to be a lot on the line, people don't really hack in EU4, so preventing it was never a really major concern. And if someone does, well, you can just ban them from the lobby and move on with your life. And that's the other point. A lot of people that do end up using these hacks are incredibly unsubtle with them. And when you look at Granada and you see it owning all of Iberia, having 60 development on all of their starting cores, you start to realize, yeah, maybe this guy isn't legitimate. And furthermore, with access to most save game analysis tools like Scan2Beg being quite developed, you can use that to see what's going on. And when you start seeing a country generate 80,000 mana just out of thin air, you can start to bring into question the legitimacy of that run. So with all that said and done, that is going to define what I would consider level 5 exploit. You are still manipulating the code. In this case, with Granada here, I didn't do anything in game. I just used the launcher to manipulate game code to give me the starting provinces. But at tier 5, you're not doing it through just the game portal. You're doing it by actively going to the game code and changing it to suit your needs while trying to bypass Paradox's system. And that's going to be defining the tier 5 exploit for me. Well, those are the 5 levels of exploiting that I promised to deliver, and personally, before I give my opinion, feel free to pause the video and make up your own mind. With that said, what is my opinion? Well, if you're playing in multiplayer, I'm going to be actually putting the lock off at level 2 and above. Level 2 inclusive is an exploit. Canceling lock movement with a boat is very hard to enforce, but it's things like that I would consider an exploit. If you can't reasonably claim that you can accidentally perform it, or an AI would do it by accident, I consider that an exploit. So for me, within the domain of multiplayer, level 2, 3, 4, and 5 are clearly exploits. In single player, when Iron Man, that's going to change. As controversial or interesting as it may seem, I think when you're just playing single player, birding is fine. You're mitigating bad RNG, and it's up to you to decide how much fun it takes out of the game and how much RNG or bad events you're going to be exposed to. You can technically use it to run around and siege every fort in 5 seconds, but most people don't, and I think just putting a blanket ban on it in that way is a bit unfair. As for smaller mini-level exploits like cancelling lock movement of the boat, well, you're in a single player, so what's the AI going to complain to? The manager. You'll be fine. Once you start getting to level 4 though, at that point I'm going to have to ask, do you actually enjoy playing EU4, or are you just doing this for bragging rights for some kind of achievement? And this is probably where I'm definitely going to be having the cutoff point. Level 4 and level 5 for single player Iron Man is where I'm going to be drawing the line. But level 1 to 3, if it's in single player, have fun. So with all that said and done, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next one. Goodbye.